The fifth grade students are happy that you could join us for this very special Lenten reflection. It is our hope that this performance will remind each of us how much Jesus loves us. Please remain seated throughout the service. At the end of each station, please pray with us, because by your holy cross you have redeemed the world. Please
This is a hard story to tell. So many things happened. So many people were involved. There seemed to be so much hate in the air that day. It's hard to believe that this is a story about love. We were witnesses so. We saw it all. The beating, the torture, the murder. It was awful. I can still hear the sounds of the crowd cheering, the soldiers shouting orders, and the woman crying. It was a violent thing that happened. And yet, when I think about that day, a certain peace comes to me. Here's what happened. See if you know what I mean. I guess I showed up just about the time Jesus returned from Herod's court to Pilate's court. They sure played games with Jesus.
The first station, Jesus meets Pilate. After Jesus was betrayed by his own apostle, Judas, he was taken to prison. Here they beat him, made fun of him, and crowned him with painful thorns. Many of his enemies wanted Jesus out of the way. They wanted him to die. They took him to the governor, Pontius Pilate, who condemned him to die on the cross. Jesus would die for the love of God and love of us.
look! Jesus is with Pilate!
Are you the king of the Jews?
That is your turn.
He's a troublemaker! Why? What evil has he done?
He thinks he's the son of God. It's blasphemy.
Go get Barabbas.
Yes, sir.
What do you want with me?
Silence! Show some respect for the government.
Would you rather I release Barabbas and then kill her, or this man, Jesus?
Release Barabbas. Crucify Jesus.
As you wish, so it shall be done. Release Barabbas and prepare Jesus.
The second station, Jesus carries the cross. The soldiers brought a large wooden cross to Jesus, and he took it upon his shoulders. It was rough and heavy. Jesus was weak, tired, and hurting, but began to carry the cross to Calvary, where he would die. Sometimes the cross is called the wood of salvation. On the day of his death, Jesus changed the the cross into a sign of hope and salvation for each of us. The world's evil and hatred can be changed by God's love. Jesus could change this cross which he carried for the love of God and love of us.
Look! There's the cross! Stay back!
I just want to tell us what's going on. Who is that?
That's Jesus. He's the one who's been teaching all over Judea.
The third station, Jesus falls the first time. Jesus was so weak and tired as he walked the road to Calvary. Soon after, he began to carry the cross. It became too heavy and too painful for his failing strength. Jesus fell to the ground under the weight of the cross. No one helped him, as he would not be able to get up. With courage and patience, he began up and began to walk the road again. He did this for the love of God and for the love of us.
Come on, get up! We're not here, let's go! Get on your feet, move it! We don't have all day, let's go!
The fourth station, Jesus meets his mother. Jesus' mother, Mary, was always a faithful follower of her son and his teachings. So many times she walked with him as he told of God's love, cured the sick, and helped those who were in pain. She loved him and was so proud of him. On his walk to Calvary, Mary was still there with love for her son. Jesus was thankful that she was there for him. The pain in their eyes spoke more than any words. Without words, Jesus knew that his mother loved him. He had learned so much from Mary about the love of God and love of us.
Look, there's his mother! Where's his mother? Oh, there.
Their eyes met, but there were no words to say.
The fifth station, Simon helps Jesus carry the cross. The cross seemed to get heavier with every step that Jesus took. The soldiers noticed Jesus getting weaker. He was staggering and about to fall under the heavy load on his shoulders. The soldiers pulled a man from the crowd along the roadside. They forced him to help Jesus carry his cross. This stranger, whose name was Simon of Cyrene, was not one of Jesus' followers. Perhaps he was too frightened to refuse to help, but Simon did help Jesus carry the cross. We believe that Simon's life was changed forever because he helped someone who was weaker than he. This is what is meant by the love of God and love of others.
He's Somebody help him! He's never gonna make it to Calvary! Hey, who's not running up the cross? Me? Why me? Get over there now! Why me?
The sixth station, Veronica wipes the face of Jesus. Crowds gathered all along the roadside on the way to Calvary. Many of the people were there to see Jesus die. There were others, though, whose hearts broke as they saw Jesus' cruel suffering. A woman named Veronica stepped out from the crowd into the roadway. As Jesus held his cross, Veronica held on a cloth, perhaps her own veil, and wiped the blood and sweat from the face of Jesus. Her simple kindness was one of the most loving things to happen to Jesus on that day. It helps him to continue that day during which he showed his love of God and love of us.
Stop! Where do you think you're going? Please, I have to get to Jesus. I must wipe his face. Let him through. Hurry up!
Jesus, oh Jesus.
The seventh station, Jesus falls a second time. The walk to Calvary Hill was only half over and there was was still a long distance to go. Again, Jesus was made to carry his heavy cross alone. It had become harder and harder for him to stand up. Jesus was out of breath and had no strength left. He stumbled, staggered, and fell again. The weight of the heavy cross almost crushed him to the ground. How could this be the wood of salvation? Yet Jesus again stood up, lifted his cross, and began to walk forward. He was able to do this because of his strong love of God and love of us.
Keep moving! That's right, get up there!
The 8th station, Jesus meets the women and children. There were many whose hearts broke when they saw Jesus in such pain. A group of women with their children were crying because so many people had treated Jesus so cruelly. Perhaps at that moment the women remembered how Jesus used to lift their children and hold them close to his heart. Now they wished they could hold the suffering Jesus in their arms.
Jesus, what are they doing to you? Oh my Lord, help them! Somebody help them! Let me help you! Women of Jerusalem, do not cry for me. Weep for yourself and for the children.
The 9th station, Jesus falls a 3rd time. The crowds continued to watch Jesus struggle to carry the cross upon which he would die. Many mocked him, while others were filled with sadness. Jesus' followers were frightened. Some of them went to hide him. Jesus came to Calvary Hill and tried to climb it. He had lost so much strength. He was bleeding and so exhausted. Under the weight of the heavy cross, Jesus falls, as if he was defeated. Again, he struggles to stand up. He will not be defeated because Jesus has chosen to live this way of the cross out of love of God and love of us.
The 10th station, Jesus is stripped of his clothes. Having been able to stand again and lift his cross, Jesus took the final step to the top of Calvary Hill. The soldiers who had guarded his way of the cross let Jesus drop the cross to the ground. As Jesus stood in front of the crowds, he was again mocked and humiliated. The soldiers pulled off his clothes, leaving him embarrassed without his dignity. He was treated as a common criminal. His enemies saw him as a worthless human being. His followers saw him as the human being who lived in the love of God and love of us.
Look at this road. Who is going to get this? I'll take it. Oh no, you don't want your loss for this.
Alright, ready? 1, 2.
The 11th station, Jesus is nailed to the cross. In the time of Jesus, many criminals died on the cross. They were forced to die tied to a cross for all to see. Jesus was not tied, but his hands and feet were nailed to the wood before his cross was lifted for all to see. Everyone saw now that this preacher and prophet could not escape. Jesus, who had released people from prisons of blindness, sin, sickness, and death, was now able to get free. How could
and suffering. It can only be His great love of God and love of us.
Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do.
Peter said, "Come down from the cross." He said, "Guys, let him save himself. If you're the king of the Jews, save yourself." The 12th station, Jesus dies upon the cross. Could this have been the wood of salvation? Could this cross be our hope and salvation? Jesus called out to God, for he was frightened, feeling abandoned and about to die. He was full of pain. More important than his pain was his love of God and care for his mother and for the people around him. He asked them to care for one another. With all his strength drained and his fear relieved, he gave his spirit over to God and died upon the cross. To the end, he spoke of his love of God and love of us.
Father, into your hands I commend my spirit.
That was a moment you can never forget. Darkness fell over the whole land until mid-afternoon with an eclipse of the sun.
Surely, this was an innocent man.
13th station, Jesus is placed in Mary's arms. When her child Jesus was still a baby, Mary was told that he would be rejected by many and that her heart would be broken. When her child Jesus died on the cross, some friends gently took his body down from the cross and placed it in Mary's arms. Mary had held Jesus like this when he was a baby. Now his body had no life left in it. Mary's heart broke with such sadness, emptiness, and grief. She remembered her happy days with her son. She remembered her pride, and she remembered the prophecy. Jesus had been rejected for his love of God and love of us.
I was given me permission to take down the body of Jesus. I have a burial place for Jesus.
Oh, Jesus, my son. The 14th station. Jesus is laid in the tomb. When he was born in Bethlehem, the lively new baby Jesus rested in a borrowed manger. His mother cared for him with love, joy, and tenderness. When he died on Calvary's hill, there was no place to rest his body. But in place of his lifeless body in a borrowed tomb, this was the final stopping place of Jesus' way of the cross. With love, broken hearts, and great tenderness, his mother and his friends cared for him. They washed his body, anointed with perfumes, and covered it.
This is a brand new tomb cut out of rock. It is time to prepare the body of Jesus for burial.
I have the perfumes and spices ready. Let me wash him. Here's some fine linen that we can use. Thank you.
That was the day of preparation, and the Sabbath was about to begin. The woman who had come from Galilee followed along behind. They saw the tomb and how his body was buried. Then they went back to prepare the spices and perfumes. They observed the Sabbath as a day of rest, in keeping with Jewish law. All was quiet when I went home that day.